Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today we are in the park. It's a little hot today for me to be hiking out to the spot that I normally go, and I actually have a really busy day, so I'm kind of squeezing this video into my schedule. Anyway, we're in beautiful Joe Park in Meaford, Ontario. Really nice little park. Not a whole lot of, a nice park for walking, sitting, having a picnic. There's no playground for the kids or anything, but if you want a nice spot to relax, this is not a bad one. Let me scroll down here and we'll take a look at what I've got on the picnic table. And here are some of the knives. I actually have a number of examples here. I want to talk about folders in the forest. This is a video I said I would be doing. A number of you commented and made some worthwhile contributions to that video. Hold on, let me get things squared away here in terms of where the camera's sitting. There we go. And so I wanted to go ahead and get this video out there for you guys and start off by making a couple of points. First of all, I do think, I said this in the survival knife video, I do think that a folder can be a useful tool in an outdoor setting. Although it's maybe not ideal for a lot of the things you may want to do with your knife in the forest, there are still plenty of things you can get done and plenty of work you can do with a good quality folding knife. So the first off, let me kind of give some parameters for our discussion, okay? If you are, going on an afternoon hike to, I don't know, a scenic lookout or something, you're going to be, walking an hour in and walking an hour out, take whatever knife you want, right? There's very little chance that you're going to need some kind of serious survival type of knife in that situation, all right? Now, there are obviously limits. It depends where that hike is going to be. It depends on what you're going to be doing and all that kind of stuff. But we're going to imagine, you're going to be maybe in a slightly more serious situation. Maybe you're planning to do, you're planning to start a fire, or you're going to be overnight in the forest, or you're envisioning a possibility that, you may need your cutting tool for a little more than just, opening the package of trail mix you brought with you. Okay, so that's our scenario. Okay, and if you're in that situation, I think there are still folding knives that can do most of what you'd want to do. Now, would I want to bring just a folding knife in that scenario? Probably not. But could I, and do I think it would be possible? Yes, I absolutely do think it would be possible. So let's imagine, you're envisioning, you may have to do a little bit of processing of firewood. You may have to, carve a tent stake or something to work on a shelter. I'm assuming you're not going to try to cut down trees and build a log cabin, but there's some work that you're probably going to have to get done with your knife. All right. So having said all of that stuff, let's talk about some of the things I would be looking for in a folding knife for that scenario. All right. Let me rearrange things a little bit. I'd like to work in a number of different knives as we kind of work our way through our conversation here. So all of the folders here, I think are going to be absolutely fine. Now, this of course is the Victorinox Forester, and it does have some additional tools that may or may not be useful to you. Most especially though is probably going to be the saw. If you're doing, some light cutting, you could get a little bit of extra work done with a saw. Maybe you'd use it to cut down, I don't know, a sapling to use for a ridgepole for your tent or something like that, or for your tarp shelter. Okay. The only drawback to this particular knife that I would have is the steel is not fantastic. I mean, it's going to be fine for a lot of things. Certainly it's going to be able to be sharpened in the field. But this wouldn't necessarily be my first pick. I would probably lean more towards some of the other knives I have on the table, although I don't think this would be a horrible choice either. Okay, let me make that clear. I don't want you Victorinox fans out there to be jumping down my throat. I think it's an adequate knife. I think you can get a lot done with it. The other thing I want to say, we'll save that for a little bit longer. Let's get back to what would I be looking for in the knife that I would take out into the forest with me, because there are a few important things. First, let's talk a little bit about blade shape. And this is a discussion I left out of my survival knife video, but I think the same logic could be applied to just a larger knife. Okay, in terms of blade shape and blade grind, I'm gonna want something that has some belly to it. Okay, I don't want a tanto. Now, the other thing I'm gonna want is something that's thin behind the edge so I can get a decent amount of slicing done. Yes, it's true that a really thickly ground blade is going to be a little stronger, but I'm not going to be using my folding knife. Maybe you do, okay? But I'm not going to be using my knife as a screwdriver. I'm not going to be, batoning with it. I'm not going to be, even let's say I'm going to put a notch in a piece of wood. So you can imagine kind of pushing into the wood and then breaking the material out like that. I would do that. And with the knives that I've got here on the table, I would feel pretty comfortable doing that. Do I have knives that I wouldn't? Absolutely. And is there a limitation with a folding knife? Because when you start putting a twisting motion on that, you're putting a different kind of force on this pin and on this whole assembly than it's really designed for. I fully appreciate that and I get it. That said, I think most of these knives would handle that kind of, just a little bit of lateral force just fine. All right, whether the blade is flat ground or hollow ground, I don't really care. Either, whatever way you choose to sort of get a balanced blade. And that's the big thing I would be looking for, is a blade that is fairly strong, all right, while still being good at cutting stuff, okay? And all of these knives, serve as pretty good examples of that. This one would have the thinnest blade stock, but all of these knives are pretty robust. Now, I did bring the Para 2 out for one particular reason, and that is the very fine tip here. That could potentially be an issue. I normally would stay away from knives that are that thin at the point. If I did have this in my pocket and decided, I don't know, maybe I just happened to have it with me and was in the forest and decided to stay, right? That seems weird, but that's happened to me before. The boys and I have gone out, we planned on going for a hike and ended up, hey, let's build a shelter and stay overnight. This would not be my first choice, but I don't think it would, if you were careful with it, I think you could make it work. I would prefer, however, something more like this, where you've got lots of thickness, lots of strength, lots of durability out there. Sorry guys, just got a mosquito I had to take care of. Anyway, in terms of blade shape then, I definitely want like a drop point or a clip point. I want to have some belly. I don't want any serrations. And I want either a flat grind, in terms of flat or hollow or Scandi, I don't really care as long as it's well balanced, okay? And by well balanced, I mean it's a blade that is strong and reliable, but can still slice, okay? And I do like that. Let's switch out a couple of these knives here and throw some more budget-friendly offerings in, because one of the things I think is important to point out is that a good knife for the bush doesn't need to be expensive, okay? It really doesn't. And a knife that I have confidence in, or the knife that delivers a lot of confidence, again, doesn't need to be crazy, huge, and super overbuilt. All right, let's talk about locks just a little bit. I've got a couple liner locks here. I've got the triad lock. I've got a titanium frame lock. Do I prefer any of these over the others? No, not really. I suppose liner lock would be, my least favorite, but both of these liner locks, okay, the Bird Raven 2 and the Rat Model 1, both have very thick, heavy-duty liner locks that inspire a lot of confidence. The Bird with the BD1 steel and that really thick blade stock compared to, say, a Para 2 or Rat 1, both is really, really nice. There's kind of a bit of wind blowing. I hope that doesn't mess with our sound too much. Anyway, let's get back to our discussion. So yeah, I think all of these, I would be completely confident taking these out to the bush and, not being worried that the lock would fail or that it would fall on my hand. The Victorinox, it's a different lock. It goes the other way. There is some blade play, but essentially I treat this like a slip joint. And yeah, a slip joint can be useful in the bush as long as, again, I would treat this like the Para 2. Remember I said I would still, I think you get a lot done with this, but I would want to take a little bit of care. Same is true of this guy. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to what I think is one of the most important features of a knife you're going to take in the bush, and that is the handle, okay? And I've got this here because this is such a great example of an extremely comfortable handle. The 3D Contour G10 is really, really comfortable in hand. You've got that nice choil that, of course, I created, so you can do some detailed cutting work. I think this is a great option. It's really, really comfortable, really ergonomic. You're not going to get hot spots, and you're not going to get as much fatigue. Same is true of this guy. You know, all of these that I have here, I kind of got out anticipating this portion of the discussion. Extremely comfortable handles, extremely ergonomic, so you can really do a lot and feel comfortable the whole time, okay? The one limitation I would put on the bird is the blade, the cutting edge is a little shorter than I like to see, but it's not the end of the world. Okay, so handle, I think, is one of the biggest, most important features. For an EDC knife that you're going to pull out and do some light cutting from time to time, I don't think handle is a major consideration. But for a knife you're going to take into the bush, the handle shape and the ergonomics are going to be paramount, because, you know, if this is your only knife that you've got with you on this particular trip, you're going to be using it a lot, and it needs to be really, really comfortable, and it needs to have a little bit of grip. I will say I would maybe take a few points away from the Crooked River, just because it's not as grippy. Okay, if the jimping here was a little prouder of the bolsters, I would maybe be talking saying something different about this, but this knife would be maybe not as ideal for a whole lot of, you know, outdoor cutting, right? I know it's a hunting knife, and I know that's a bit of a distraction, but this is a little, I would just like to see it a little grippier. I will say, if you kind of choke up on it like this and you let this choil here serve as a bit of a guard, it gets pretty good. It feels pretty good up here. Down here, it's not so much. There's not as much sort of positive traction. So handle is, of course, a big consideration. Now, let's talk about knives that I would recommend. Obviously, the ones on the table, most of the ones I've shown you, are pretty good examples that I think would serve really well in a, you know, sort of outdoor use scenario. I think obviously the Rat Model 1 is specifically designed for that. Before I get into any more of my recommendations, and I do have a fair list here, I want to share the recommendations that you guys made the other day. So in the survival knife video, I asked you guys to go ahead and share with me the knives that you would want if you were going into the forest. Because I haven't brought the Recon 1 in here, but I think the Recon 1 would be a good example too. Okay, there, I think I've got everything kind of packed into this picture now. So the knives that you guys recommended were the Formax, and I think that's a great pick. The SR1, again, I think the SR1 is a fantastic choice. Spyderco Tough, okay, we don't have a Tough here, but the Lion Spy is gonna sort of fill that role as a big, heavy-duty, overbuilt Spyderco. Really, really hefty little knife there. And the Tough is even beyond that with the 3V steel, just a fantastic knife. Now the blade grind is pretty thick, but I think it's going to be, you know, slicey enough to do what you need to do in the forest. The Doug Ritter Griptilian with the Doug Ritter blade shape, I think, is a great option as well. The Spyderco Gale Bradley, I think, would be a great option. You know, one of the Griptilian options, I already mentioned the Ritter grip, but I think the 20CV G10 Griptilian would be great. You guys know I love the Benchmade Freak. I think that's a great knife for the kind of use that we're describing right now. In addition, you know, the knives that I have here on the table, I would feel comfortable putting any one of these in my pocket and doing the kinds of things we've been describing. As I pointed out, I would kind of lean towards some over the others. So let me kind of do a quick ranking of these knives in terms of which I would pick. So we'll start on this side, and I'll just rearrange these knives in terms of the order that I would go if I was actually getting ready to do this. All right, I'm gonna lean toward the Formax first, the Ultimate Hunter, the Rat Model 1, let's see, we've got to fit the Lion Spy in here somewhere. I would put it about as a, you know, somewhere in here. Okay, so that's how I would rank these in terms of the knives that I would want from my first pick to sort of the one I would go with last. That is the Victorinox over here, and that's largely because of the steel and the relatively thin lock bar. One thing I will point out about these is none of these have bearings, okay? None of them have, you know, some of the more expensive dressy features that we look for in higher end knives. And that's because a lot of those expensive dressy features are not well suited to toughness and durability, okay? I would certainly feel comfortable adding to this list, you know, a Chris Reeve, you know, 21 or Inkosi. You guys know I like the Inkosi. So those would be good options. And notice that there's quite a big price range here. You don't need to spend tons and tons of money on a good folder for the woods, okay? And in fact, you don't really need to spend tons of money on a good fixed blade either. You know, in the survival knife video, we had quite a good price range represented as well. So there you go, guys. Those are my thoughts about bringing a folder to the forest. These are some of my favorite picks from my collection, as well as some recommendations from you guys, and some recommendations of knives that I don't happen to have. Overall, I do think that a fixed blade is going to be better suited to most outdoor tasks. And even if I was going on that 1 hour hike, I would probably grab, you know, my GSO or my, you know, Idaho Hunter from Tops and bring that with me. But if you know, it was the middle of the day and I happen to have one of these in my pocket and someone said, hey, you know, let's go for a hike in the woods, we'll start a little fire, we'll, you know, build a shelter, whatever, I would feel totally confident doing all of that work with any one of these knives. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will talk to you soon.